He married her without knowing she was his mother. But as time passed, he discovered in her not only a wife's love, but the deepest form of love a soul could ever find. The road back to the village was dry and cracked beneath the weight of Mark's boots. Each step stirred up dust that hovered in the warm air for a moment before settling again. A warm, late summer breeze brushed past the worn patches on his jacket, nudging the edge of his memory. It had been for years since had last walked this path. For long years of marching, training, saluting, surviving. The army had taken him in at 18. A boy with no home, no family, and no history. It had given him discipline. Yes, but no sense of belonging. The longing he carried now was beyond anything he had known there. He didn't remember much of his childhood in this village. Or maybe he didn't have much to remember. Had grown up in the corners of people's lives, working in fields, sleeping in barns, occasionally given a blanket in winter by a kind old woman, but mostly, he was alone. When the recruiters came through the area, he didn't hesitate. The war was far away, but the promise of food and shelter was enough. Now, to start Jan 22, he returned. Returned to what? He didn't know. He only knew he needed to be here. The village lay in a quiet valley between soft, rolling hills. The houses were small, mostly wooden, nestled into earth and memory. A few smoke plumes drifted upward from chimneys. The scent of burning pine and bread brought a strange sting to his eyes. It was a place that had barely changed, while he felt aged by lifetimes. As he crossed the old stone bridge, he saw the figure of a woman standing near the well at the center of the square. She was filling a bucket, her movements deliberate and calm. Something about her presence made him slow his steps. Her hair, dark with touches of silver, was tied into a neat braid. Her dress was plain, but clean, as if she belonged both to this world and slightly apart from it. She looked up as he passed. "Good morning," she said softly. Mark nodded, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "Good morning. Are you back from the service?" she asked, eyes worn and observant. "Yes," he said. "Just arrived." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Many come back changed. I hope you found something worthwhile there." He hesitated. "I'm not sure yet. Mark, by the way." The woman's face shifted, almost imperceptibly, as she studied him. "Mark," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "Mila." Her voice was gentle, but strong, like someone who had endured too much with grace. Mark blinked, sensing something familiar, though he couldn't place it. "I grew up here," he said, looking around at the buildings. "At least, I think I did. I don't have much family." Her eyes softened. "I had a son once. He left the village many years ago. I don't know where he is now." Mark felt the air between them shift. He nodded, unsure how to respond. "Would you like something to eat?" she asked suddenly. "You look like you've walked a long way." He paused, as if expecting to wake from a dream. No one had invited him in for a meal in years. "Yes," he said softly. "Thank you." Mila led him to her house at the edge of the village. It was modest, surrounded by a small garden bursting with color-vibrant flowers, herbs, vegetables. It gave the place an aura of life. She pushed open the wooden door. Inside, everything was worn and orderly. The air smelled of fresh bread and mint. "You can sit here," she said, motioning to the table. He sat. She brought him soup, a simple bowl of potatoes, carrots, and herbs and fresh bread. Mark ate slowly at first, then hungrily. The warmth of the food spread through him, melting the cold that had settled in his bones from years without a home. Mila watched him from across the table, her hands folded in her lap. "You remind me of someone," she said quietly. "Who?" Mark asked between mouthfuls. "My son," she said, eyes drifting to the window. "His name was Mark too." The spoon froze in his hand. She continued softly. "He was taken by the state when he was very small. His father died in a logging accident. They said I was unfit to keep him. I searched for him for years, but without money or connections." Her voice trailed off. Mark swallowed, throat tight. "I don't remember, but I was in the care of strangers growing up. They never told me where I came from." Mila's eyes met his, deep and searching. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Something passed between them, something old, woven into time. Mark cleared his throat, pushing the bowl aside. "Thank you for the food. It's been a long time since I've eaten at a table. You are welcome to stay here if you have no place to go," she said gently. "There is a spare room. I don't have much, but I wouldn't turn you away." Mark opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. What did he have to return to? An empty bed in a barracks, a town he barely remembered. This was warmth. This was shelter. This was home. Are you sure? He asked. She nodded. You seem like someone who needs rest. And I wouldn't mind the company. He breathed out and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in years, he felt something like peace. That night, Mark slept in the small, quiet room Mila had prepared for him. He lay awake for a while, staring at the low wooden ceiling, listening to the chime of crickets outside. It felt like being held by the earth itself. He fell asleep thinking of nothing and everything. In the days that followed, he settled into life there. He helped Mila tend to her garden, sweep the yard, fetch firewood. They spoke often, sharing both silence and stories. She told him about the village, its harvests, its losses, its hopes. He told her about the army, the drills, the hunger for meaning, the camaraderie, the pain. Whenever she smiled, Mark felt something soften in his chest. He found himself drawn to her kindness, the way she carried sorrow yet still found ways to nurture life. Mila, in turn, seemed to find comfort in his presence. In the quiet moments between tasks, he noticed her watching him, with a gaze that felt safe, familiar. One evening, they sat by the fire as the sun dipped beyond the hills. Mila poured him a cup of tea and asked, "Do you ever feel like life is guiding you towards something, without your knowing?" "Yes," Mark said, after a moment. "Sometimes I think all the wandering I've done was leading me here. To this house, to you." Her breath caught slightly. The firelight danced across her face, highlighting lines carved by years and love. "It has been a long time since I felt alive," she whispered. Mark reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Their bond grew deeper, not just as two lost souls finding shelter in each other, but as something fragile, powerful, and real. He found himself lingering in doorways, admiring the way she bent to tend the soil. She noticed the way he moved with gentleness, despite the strength in his arms. It was not a love that exploded. It was a love that formed slowly, like dawn rising over the horizon. One night, it finally unfolded. They stood in the garden beneath the stars. Mila gathered herbs in her apron, thyme, chamomile, and lavender. Mark stepped beside her, stilling her hands. She looked up at him, the cool glow of the moon reflecting in her eyes. "Stay," she murmured. "I already have," he replied. Weeks later, Mila told him she was with child. Mark knelt before her, pressing his forehead to her stomach. They wept together, tears of shock, joy, fear, and undeniable belonging. When the baby was born, the village buzzed with whispers. A woman of 51, with a child in her arms, and a man 29 years her junior beside her. That the child was beautiful, healthy, full of life. They named him Maxim. Mark held his son with trembling hands. In that moment, the ache of every want he carried, every lonely night in the barracks, every forgotten corner of his childhood disappeared. He belonged. He was father. He was family. The seasons passed, and so did the questions of lineage, of truth, of whether this path was meant to be. All he knew was this: he had found her, and she had found him. In a world that had taken everything from them, they had chosen to stay together. The seasons changed, but the house at the edge of the village remained full of laughter, full of warmth, full of the gentle chaos of a new family finding its rhythm. Mark chopped wood in the mornings, his shirt damp with sweat, his muscles moving with purpose and calm. Mila tended to the garden, baby Maxim cradled in one arm, humming softly. Their days were simple but sacred. Every moment slipped into the next like threads woven into a tapestry. Maxim grew quickly, with bright eyes and small, grasping hands. Mila and Mark watched him take his first steps on a crisp autumn morning, golden leaves falling around them like confetti from the sky. Mark lifted his son into the air, laughing, and in that laughter, something inside him healed a little more each time. They almost forgot to question what brought them together. Almost. But truth, like roots beneath the earth, has ways of pushing upward. One winter night, a storm rattled the shutters. Rain hit the windows in sharp, rhythmic slaps. Mark sat at the table, a lamp flickering, sorting through an old wooden chest he'd found in Mila's attic. She had never told him what was in it. "Just things from the past," she'd said. "You don't need to trouble yourself with it." But curiosity tugged at him. Inside the chest were scraps of fabrics, 2 small wooden toes, faded letters tied in ribbon, and a folded sheet of paper with an official government seal. His eyes followed the faded ink: name, date of birth, child's removal notice. Mark's skin turned cold. The name on the document was his. The date matched his memory of a childhood too blurred to remember. that the name written below the line for mother's identity made his breath catch. Mila. His Mila. The room went silent except for the storm outside. He felt the weight of time settle on his shoulders. The truth, devastating, unimaginable, undeniable, had come for him. He stood, heart pounding, and walked into the room where Mila rocked Maxim near the fireplace. The baby slept in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling in peace. "Tell me," Mark said, voice quiet but trembling. "Did you ever have a son? A boy named Mark?" Mila looked up slowly, pain flickering in her eyes. She knew. In an instant, she knew what he had found. With shaking hands, she laid Maxim in his crib, then folded her fingers in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. "I had a son. They took him from me. I searched and searched. I never found him." Not until she broke. Tears began to fall, silent and heavy. Mark stepped back, struggling for breath. The truth was enormous, suffocating. He wanted to run, to shatter the night with screams. But instead, he stood frozen, torn between horror and something deeper, something he could not name. "You knew?" he asked. "Did you know it was me?" Mila shook her head. "No, not at first. Not until I saw your eyes, the shape of your hands, the way you walked. Then I hoped. But I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't know how to tell you, how to say it without losing you all over again." The room felt too small, too dark. Mark paced, hands on his head. "I am your son," he muttered. "And your husband." His voice cracked. "What are we?" Mila rose, but did not come close. She stood, fragile and strong all at once, watching him from across the room. "We are broken, Mark," she said. "We are broken, but we are still alive. And we made something new, something no one else can understand." He turned, eyes burning, torn between love and shock. The storm outside raged on, but inside, silence hung heavy. "Well," he said at last, "what do we do now?" She looked at him, and in that moment, her face held not sorrow, but courage. "We go on. We love our son. We love our children. We do not run from who we are. We survived the world before we found each other. We will survive this, too." Mark sank into a chair, covered his face. But then something shifted inside him. Something old and aching broke open and let something else through. Acceptance. The world had never given him answers. It had never given him a place. But this woman had. She gave him home. She gave him love. He lowered his hands, looked at Mila, truly looked. "I love you," he said. "In every way." Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "I love you too, as mother, as wife, as soul." And somehow, that was enough. Days turned into years. The world, in its indifference, shifted. But inside Mila's house, life continued to grow. Mila bore 3 daughters after Maxim: Angelica, Clara, and Sophia. The girls were beautiful, with bright eyes and intelligent minds. They played along the river, collected flowers in the meadow, and learned to bake bread at Mila's side. Maxim watched over them, older by only a few years, but always steady, always quietly caring. Mark taught him how to sharpen a blade, how to mend leather, how to listen to the wind. Together, they made music simply by being alive. And then, the world shattered again. War came. It swept through the land like a burning wind. Men were taken, villages emptied. A summons came for Mark. Again, he was to join the front. Mila stood silent on the morning he left. She did not cry. She did not crumble. She tied her braid back, kissed him long and slow, and whispered, "Return. If the world tries to take you again, fight for your home." Mark nodded, throat thick. "You are my home." He left with a rifle and a heavy coat, leaving behind the only peace he'd ever known. The front was cruel. Mud, blood, screams, endless marching. Mark felt his soul waver day by day. But each night, when he closed his eyes, he saw Mila's face, heard her voice. He thought of his children, their footsteps skittering on the wooden floors. He fought not for a country, but for them. 2 months in, word reached Mila. Mark was injured, badly, but still alive. She didn't hesitate. She went, leaving the children with a neighbor. Mila traveled across fields and burned towns, carrying salves and cloth and prayers. She reached the camp, found Mark in a tent smelling of iron and death. His leg was torn by shrapnel, his arm broken, but he was breathing. She stayed with him for days, feeding him broth, wiping sweat from his brow, singing old lullabies she thought she'd forgotten. One night, he whispered, "Why do you do all this?" Mila leaned close. Because you are my son, my husband, my lifeline, and I will not let the world break you again. He slept, and in that sleep, he healed. Because of his many children, Mark was eventually discharged, sent home early. The state deemed him more valuable among the living than the dead. Mila believed it was a kind of mercy, a gift from the universe itself. They returned to the village together, tired, marked by war, but still whole. Mark limped, but he smiled. The children ran to them, hearts bursting. The house at the edge of the village filled once more with music. Life settled. Time, quiet and relentless, continued its course. Seasons turned. Children grew. Hair silvered. Mila aged gracefully, her eyes gentle, her presence constant. She had lived through 2 wars, a lost child, the scandal of forbidden love. And yet, she never stopped tending the soil, never stopped loving. One winter morning, when snow lay silent on the village roofs, Mila passed quietly in her sleep. Mark found her with hands folded over her heart, a half-wrapped scarf draped over her lap. She had been making it for their youngest daughter. He did not speak for 3 days. Then, on the 4th day, he walked to the hill above the house, where a single oak stood strong. He dug her grave himself, though his wounds had long left him frail. He buried her there, beneath the tree, and whispered, "Thank you for finding me, for loving me, for giving me a name." Years passed. Mark was 62 when he met Lucy, a widow who came from the nearby town. She was kind, quiet, and unlike Mila in almost every way. But she did not run when Mark told her his story. She listened. She placed her hand on his and said, "Love does not need to be understood to be true." He married her, and she filled the last years of his life with soft warmth. Their children grew, learned, traveled. Maxim became a teacher, Angelica a seamstress in the city, Clara a nurse, Sophia married a carpenter and settled by the sea. They all returned, once a year, to the house at the edge of the village, to the garden Mila once tended. They gathered by the oak where she rested. They spoke softly, and they remembered. Mark lived long enough to see his grandchildren run through the same fields he once wandered alone. He died in his sleep, at peace, holding a pressed flower between 2 pages of a book, a flower from Mila's garden. On his grave, his children placed a stone that read, "He was loved, he loved," and that was enough. Time has a way of gathering itself into moments, tiny, fragile, fleeting, until suddenly what once was present becomes memory. So it was in the village where Mark and Mila had lived. Years passed, and the house at the edge of the field stood still, breathing in every sunrise. Every season, the gardens still bloomed in the spring. The oak still swayed on the hill. Everything was quieter now, but nothing was forgotten. Maxim was the first to return after his father's passing. Tall and broad-shouldered, with thoughtful eyes and gentle hands, he stood in the doorway of the now empty house. Dust particles floated in the air, illuminated by shafts of sunlight breaking through cracks in the shutters. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he walked. He traced his fingers over the walls, the table, the chair where his mother once sat. It felt like touching the fabric of time itself. He remembered long days spent playing in the yard, sitting on Mila's lap as she sang him songs from her childhood, ancient ballads and whispered prayers. He remembered watching his father sharpen a blade, chop wood, mend a fence, both of them always working, always loving in quiet ways. He made tea, using the same old kettle. The water boiled, steam rising, filling the room with the faint scent of earth and metal. He sat at the table alone and drank slowly. His father's wedding ring lay in front of him, simple, silver, worn by decades of life. The silence pressed in. As a young boy, Maxim had known there was something different about his family. He heard whispers in the village, saw how some people stared when they passed. But Mark and Mila never let it touch him. Lovers first, mother and son second, and both things forever. They had created a world where love could grow wild, free from the judgment of others. Maxim stood and walked outside. The garden was overgrown, but still beautiful. Wild flowers had claimed the paths, the vines tangled over the fence, and beyond the garden, the oak tree stood, stretching into the sky. He walked toward it, hands in his pockets. Under the tree stood 2 gravestones, one for Mila, one for Mark. The names were etched by hand. The dates told a story, but not the whole story. He knelt before them, running his hand over the stone. "Hello," he whispered, throat tight. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." The wind rustled the oak's leaves in response. For a moment, Maxim felt that old feeling again, the sensation that the world was still holding him, still watching him grow. He closed his eyes. "I have children now," he said. "Sons. A daughter. I tell them stories about you, though I don't tell all of it yet. Some things are too sacred, but I will." When he rose, he felt lighter, as if the weight of his lineage was not a burden, but a gift. Days later, his sisters arrived. Angelica, graceful, quiet, with a streak of silver in her dark hair, touched the walls with fingertips like brushes. Remembering how she and Clara once scribbled drawings in the corners, believing no one saw, Clara, still full of fire, her voice strong even in grief, held the edges of old blankets close to her face, breathing in the scent of childhood. Sophia came last, soft-spoken, carrying with her 3 children of her own. They all sat together on the porch, eating bread and cheese, drinking milk warmed over a fire that felt strangely new now. They talked about nothing at first, then everything. "You remember how Mother used to beat the rug outside every Sunday?" Clara said, leaning back and laughing, "and then pretend she wasn't tired. And how Father sharpened his tools like they were sacred." Angelica added, "He was sacred," Maxim replied quietly. They smiled, but they didn't speak the secret, the truth of their birth. The whispered story passed quietly from one generation to the next, a fragile flame they protected between their palms. That night, they slept in the house, all of them, just as they had as children. The roof groaned in the cold, the wood cracked in the fire, and for the first time in years, the house was full again. The morning brought a strange peace. Angelica found a small wooden box in Mila's old cupboard, tucked between folded linens. Inside were letters, dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, all written in the same careful hand. Each one was addressed to "My beloved Mark." She gathered her siblings and read aloud. "My son, today the river ran clear and fast. I watched children play by its edge and thought of you. You would have been 12 this year. I wonder if your hands are big like mine, or gentle like your father's. I wonder if you still smile in your sleep. I will keep writing until you find me, until I am found." Maxim's eyes blurred. Clara reached for another letter. "My love, you have returned. I waited for so long, and even though I know not how to carry this truth, I will carry you, always." Sophia pressed her hand to her heart. They kept reading. Each letter told a story not of grief, but of faith that one day the world would bend, would return what it had taken, and it had. It had returned Mark to Mila, not as a child, but as a man, broken, searching, and in need of a home. Angelica folded the letters and placed them back carefully. "We need to keep these," she said. "They are part of us." Clara nodded. "Mother was brave," she said, "and so was Father. They taught us that love can defy everything, even the rules of the world." Sophia spoke quietly. "Do we tell our children everything?" Maxim thought for a moment, then he said, "When they're ready. Not because it's scandalous, but because it's sacred. It's ours." They packed the house soon after. Not everything, just what mattered. The letters, the ring, a few tools, a wear-upon scarf still smelling faintly of lavender. The house would stay standing, perhaps fall apart someday, but their memories had already been gathered, alive within them. Before they left, they stood under the oak one more time. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting golden light over the grass where their mother and father rested. Maxim spoke. "Father once told me that he had no name before he met Mother, that he was empty, like a cup without water." Clara smiled, and she filled it. Angelica added, "And they overflowed." They laid wild flowers at the graves, soft, delicate, like the love that had once blossomed here. In a way few could understand, they stood in silence, and the wind carried their breath away. The oak tree held the rest, as it always had. Years passed. The next generation grew and returned. Children ran through the fields, curious about the strange, creaking house at the edge of the village. They climbed the worn steps and peered through dusty windows at shadows of a family they had never met, but somehow belonged to. One boy, about 9 years old, with dark hair and bright eyes, found the oak tree and knelt beneath it. He had heard the story. He had asked questions. Now he came to see for himself. He touched the grave and whispered, "Thank you." The wind rustled. The leaves shimmered. Everything felt alive. In time, the house fell. The roof sagged. The beams broke. The garden became wild, untamed. But the tree remained, strong, enduring. At its base, 2 stones stayed side by side, stubborn against the years. And the story, their story, was never lost. It lived in the hearts of those who carried their names. It lived in the garden's soil, rich and dark. It lived in songs sung to children each night. Lullabies Mila once hummed to her son, then her husband, then her children. People sometimes spoke of it in the village still. The mother and the son, the lovers, the warriors, the ones who defied time. They said love like that could not die. It didn't. It only grew.